I've got like my Kleenex going on just in case I break down crying with you guys. And so excited, just in time for spring. Just barely started a new BeMo journal. I chose the violet, and there's like that feeling like you're in the right place at the right time kind of feeling when you start a brand new BeMo, like on the first of the month, which I did March 1st. I was like, ta-da, my habit tracking is so beautiful because of it. You know what I mean? So I'm very excited about that. It's the little things. But I thought, since I've launched this new embodiment series on my Substack, right? And if you have no idea what that is or what that means, it's because in our 4-week workshop this year that I taught for BeMo community, for everybody that came, it was 4 weeks of setting up the new year differently. It was all about shedding. It wasn't about this like crazy, like, we're just going to do all the things energy. It wasn't about goals. It wasn't about all of that, what we call need to energy in BeMo, right? So throughout that 4-week workshop, in things that I was choosing and the mindfulness and awareness of shedding, I ended up choosing embodiment as my one word for the year. I don't even want to call it a one word resolution because it's not so much a goal as it is a noticing. So anyway, I recently launched this embodiment series here on Substack, just kind of sharing what it is that I'm going through, why it's difficult for me. A lot of people come in opposite of my experience. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm one of those, like, enter backwards all the time type of people. So I have entered fully emotionally aware, emotional journey. I've gone through the BeMo and the emotional awareness, and I've arrived at that emotional security and then behavior security. But then in this 4 weeks of our, New Year's workshop, I fully noticed that I am still leaving my body out of it. So if I start to get an emotion, and I'm not talking about just like, oh, I feel love or oh, I feel scared, like the roller coaster emotion. I mean, if it arrives in my body first, which for all my like perimenopause ladies, you know what I mean. You know what I mean, right? So when it arrives in your body first and you're just like, like that is when I'm like, shut it down. Nope. So the embodiment series is all about that. And the reason I bring that up is because if you've been reading that, I've been setting up why it's so hard for me, which is I've been releasing these little tidbits about my story, about body memories and flashbacks. And so 2 of the latest posts were called Knives in 36 Hours. So you can go to that embodiment series, you can read all about it. And what I'm choosing to read today, actually, I kind of feel like it chose me because I went to get into like all my old journals and I have a box, like a serious box of old journals. I have 34 of them that were pre-BeMo, 34 of them alone that were just in the like 18 months it took for me to like create the BeMo practice. And this one was already laid open to a certain page. So, but to dial it back a moment, I never set out to create a product. This was never like, I'm going to figure out what to sell. Like, this is not like the things out there where people just redesign what exists and people just download a creative file and they're like, here's some habit tracking and like fill your jar with happy thoughts and like the same thing that you see in every cute journal and workbook out there. And those are fun, but those are also the ones that we like quit on page 3 and we're like, that was cool. BeMo came out of desperate need, which is why it lands in the center of need. And we're going to talk about that as I read this to you. So I have chosen to share with you. This is the same time of year. So February to March, 5 years ago. And ironically, very much the same thing I'm about to do. I'm like going out of town right after this Substack shares. And so it's going to be interesting. I'll have to share with you what happens if I, travel back in time and then I still have more information because of traveling a similar road. So sometimes that happens, right? So this is a time, and this is what my memoir that I am editing right now is it's based off of this journey. And so this is day number 141 on the road during a time that we didn't expect to be on the road that long. We were doing a home renovation. In the middle of that home renovation, COVID happened, slowed down the renovation, and we couldn't go home. We had no home to go to. So we were just kind of like on the road with no plan, and from going from like county to county and state to state and literally being kicked out, like we're shutting it down. This hotel is no longer open. So we're in this crazy journey. But this journey is so aligned with my past emotional journey that it's bubbling up things. So 5 years ago, we're in New Mexico. And this is the week that the knives part of my embodiment journey that I have been sharing happens. And I find it really interesting, first of all, that I didn't distinctly write about it. And I know why. It was too hard. Like I literally could not think about what was happening to me, even at a surface level, without triggering it and making it happen. So I just refused to acknowledge it. So this is the best that I could possibly do. So we're going to start there. And then I'm going to also explain where I was in this journey. Like I hadn't like figured out what would become the BeMo practice yet. So I'm going to share with you what it looked like to be in this just basic, like I call it designated worry time. It's an aspect of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And I'm going to share with you what it looked like when I got really like, help me about it. And I actually did serious CBT work and it still did not help. And then I can show you how, like, just kind of the way that I was desperately trying to figure things out from there. So I was doing other types of CBT and DBT work. I do like DBT better than CBT. And then I went into like breaking it down with worries and cares and compassion for others. And I was just attacking it with every single way that I knew how, from my undergrad degree, from the degree that I was basically getting on my own at that point. I was reading so many things and why it wasn't working. So we're going to go through what it was helping do, but also where it was lacking. And then next time I'll share with you kind of the aftermath, or like what happened once I unlocked the funk method, and how the minute that I just switched it to that, it was like the healing, the understanding, the growth was just through the roof instantaneously. Like the the relief, the ability to handle this, the quieting of body memories was just unreal. But first, we're going to start with how that was created, where the beam practice came from, and what was going on at the time. So let me know if I'm boring you or if you have questions. I'm going to kind of race through a couple of different things. But here in New Mexico, day 141 of being on the road in February of 2021. I say I'm having major issues with hallucinations that my therapist says are more like flashbacks. They occur more often lately. I can't put my finger on what causes them. It is something subtle, like thinking about the way that I look. And during this time, I can say, we'll do, what is it, director's cut. We'll talk to director's cut here. During this time, I remember being on the road and hating being a passenger because I would see myself in the rear view mirror. And every time I would see myself in this just kind of like double chin position in like the passenger seat, I looked so much like my family, so much like my father, that it was sending me places. And if you've studied, oh my gosh, my brain just left me. If you EMDR, right? If you've studied that, the whole like, or art therapy, the flashing, the following, this actually can happen on the road. It's why you get kind of zoned out when you watch the like yellow line just do this. So at this point, we're like tens of thousands of miles in, and this is what's happening to me. I'm watching the lines go by while looking at myself, hating myself. And these are the things that are coming up. So thinking about the way that I look and how much I look forward to cooking certain things, but obviously knives. But still, why the complete meltdown? I can't even talk it out. I cringe to tears. I freak out. I feel physically attacked by every attempt to describe, but even holding it in is painful. I find myself flinching or clenching fists. I'm starting to worry I'll lose my love of cooking because of how much I'm starting to hate the feeling of knives. I already can't let my partner cut anything without having a complete meltdown. I think that I'm in control, but I'm not. I find myself doing other things as well, like I've been driving more and more because I can't stand the lucid dream walker between worlds as a passenger. I even drive despite falling asleep. When I finally agree to be a passenger, I refuse to sleep. It is all a mess. I'm also feeling overwhelmed by gluttony. I look back on my calorie intake over these last 4 months, even despite exercise. I really was doing okay physically until I gave up on steps after New York City. Now I'm ballooning. I've gained 5 or 6 pounds even before that in California and New York. I really wanted to stop wasting. I hate overdoing things. I hate extra food. I hate extra calories, extra money, extra fat, extra stress, extra lack of sleep. We've been spending and eating more excessively since New York. I think we started moving into coping lifestyle. You spend so long on the road that you start finding comforts. Predictability costs money. You eat the nicer food you can rely on, and you stay in the nicer hotel. Before that, we were saving a lot by spending our points and eating twice a day. I'm sad we lost that. I feel guilty when I obligate myself to earn luxury and ruin it by excess. So I read all of that because I want you to understand what my internal life looks like then versus what I know now, and I wouldn't know without the BeMo practice. So now, with my BeMo eyes on, I look back at that and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're unearthing body memories and flashbacks that are getting serious, like really, really, really terrifying. And the minute that you're trying to talk about it, you cope by shaming the hell out of yourself, by essentially turning from, this is something really hard for me and I need help, to bam, I sound like my mother or my father just yelling at myself. But the reason I do that is because that's what I know and that's my comfort zone. And that's how I avoid what I'm going through. Because so far in my life, I had had that experience over and over again. You have feelings, you need help. Well, mine is bigger and mine is louder, and I haven't been able to do this and I haven't been able to do that. But then also, what's in here is counting steps, counting calories, counting miles, counting dollars, and the lack of control that I'm feeling, but also the really interesting ways in which I try to regain control. So I start shaming and blaming myself. And then you'll see in just like 2 more days, I blow up on my dear partner and just attack him. So the way that I was doing these like brain dumps and journaling sessions by this point is that at the end of everything, and this is going to sound so terrible, you're going to start to understand why I'm like, don't need to yourself. And we're going to let go of shame and blame. And all of these aspects of BeMo that I teach all the time is because at this point, I'm just doing a very basic cognitive behavior therapy at the end of every single flow that's just defining, like almost like summarizing what the worry is, which the problem with that is that it isn't always a worry. So you're creating worry. But anyway, you would summarize the worry and then you would tell yourself what it is you care about. And it was supposed to rewrite the situation, but it was creating a spiral of worry versus care. And it was also creating a lot of shame. Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you for saying that. So I would say, like, I worry about the fast spiral of excessive nature we've recently something. something about a comfort zone. I worry it is an anticipation of money we don't need to spend, especially overeating. So I'm sidestepping everything that I'm going through and making it all about the things that I can't control, hence worried. And then I think I'm doing great things for myself by rewriting it as what I care about. Like, I care to feel light and healthy and mindful of my life and the actions I take, understanding fully what I want and the choice I make. My choice is health and happiness. Why this doesn't work, why this was making it worse and more rapid is because when you only arrive with, this is my thought and this is the action, thought, action, worry, care, there's all different types of way with that. Yes, exactly. Sidestepping. When you arrive in that way, you're trying to this is need to energy, right? You're trying to tell yourself, oh, I just need to, or if I just can, or, if I can just shove this down and be a better person, or I just need to sleep more. I just need to get over it. How often do we tell ourselves, I just need to get over it? We're busy, especially women, busy mothers, parents, careers, all the things, and everything matters more than we do. And it's just like, "Ugh, later, I just need to get over it right now." We sidestep in all kinds of interesting ways. So rather than arriving with the like, I care to be light and understanding the how, this is what I'm talking about when I tell people that I had this yeah, but how moment in my desperation. This I'm sharing with you is the desperate weeks that brought me to a very almost dangerous yeah, but how, because it was not working. Because just telling yourself what you care about makes you feel like you're an uncaring person. It makes you feel like every single time life is hard, that it's your fault for being uncaring. Or, later I do other versions of CBT. It comes, thought action is essentially what that's all based on. Feeling action. You're like trying to figure out the relationship essentially. It still doesn't work in that point because especially if you come from volatility and disorganized behavior, it's not as simple as preoperative black and white thinking. It's not as simple as I'm anxious or I'm not, or I'm avoiding or I'm not. When you're in that disorganized behavior, the spiral is the spiral is the spiral. Like, you tell yourself to do the opposite or to land on the other side of something like caring, but then you end up flipping too many times. Like, think about it when you're a kid and somebody's like, "It's opposite day," and then someone else would be like, "Opposite of opposite day." You know what I mean? And you would just be like, no matter what you did, it was the opposite. That's what disorganized behavior feels like. That's what complex PTSD feels like, where in one moment, you know what the choice is or what the better is, and then in the next moment, you've opposited that. And then you're like, "Wait, what was the original?" And then you just start to be like, what is even real?" So this is why it very much was not working for someone like me. Here's the next super awful thing I did. I would write upside down. That's not the awful part, but just so you know why I'm flipping it all over the place. The next awful thing I would do is that after I would have, like, my brain dump in my little CBT session, this is where all that need to energy comes from. I would analyze my day by doing a daily recap of what I was able to do and what happened. And then I would end with my favorite part of the day and gratitude, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, none of this is the worst thing in the world. These things exist for a reason. But when you put them in a specific order, in a way that is memorable, in a way that is natural, that already is how we speak, already how we live, already how we think, then you unleash a whole different world. And so this is how BeMo practice came to be. So I shared with you this piece about major issues and hallucinations when I'm first trying so hard to talk about essentially the body keeps score, which I hadn't at this point. I hadn't read that book yet. Very shortly after this, it got recommended to me. So the next day, I write that I shared many of my thoughts about snowballing and gluttony and relationship worries with my partner while on a hike that morning. I didn't succeed at waking up as early as I hoped. So immediately, I'm already like, "Bleh, you did it wrong." You know what I mean? But let me be clear, director's cut, right? Let me sideshow this. When you're in your flow, when you're in your brain dump, I want you to let all of this come up. I want you to not try to say it right or say it well or say it beautifully or anything. I want you to be just the flow. And the reason for that is because when you arrive at the funk method, you're going to be able to decipher what it is that's coming out on the page, what it is that's inside of you as that kind of self-therapy, self-healing, almost as an analysis, but I hate to use that term because I don't want, especially those who are high anxiety, to get stuck in overanalyzing. So it's not self-analysis, it's just noticing. It's an act of noticing. So when I point out things here, it's not because I did it wrong. It's not because anyone's doing it wrong. It's because I am noticing now with my informed and aware BeMo practice, I am noticing what I am doing and the awfulness that I am being to myself and the constant just hitting the page with, why aren't you different? Why haven't you changed? What is wrong with you? Like, that's at the core of almost everything I'm saying over and over again. So, talk about sharing with my partner on a hike, and then I say I didn't wake up on time. But I did wake up before my alarm, and I took my medicine, and then I spent an hour snuggling with my partner, which was worth it. But at the same time, I'm like, I shouldn't have, but I did, you know? Uh, I did end up getting to do everything I wanted and dreamt of doing today simply because we extended our room and stayed the extra day. And then I go into a lot of he said, she said, I can't even believe. And it's this whole story about how I was waiting for a piece of mail. The mail hadn't come yet. It wasn't going to be there for a day, but we were in a very expensive hotel we didn't plan to stay in. We're discussing not staying there because it switches to weekend prices and it's going to be too expensive. I am feeling like I am in trouble, but I never say that because I'm not that aware at this point. I don't have that funk method to show me my limiting beliefs or what's really going on, right? So I'm just going on and on about how I'm responsible for the price of this because I'm the one waiting for the mail, and how my partner is really mad about spending the money, but then he goes and he not only spends it to add an extra night to our stay, he also upgrades our room to an extra large suite. And so then I'm like, what what? I get mad because I'm feeling like it was not my choice, but I'm the one that screwed up. I'm the one that caused this. And so by the end of this back and forth where we're fighting over this, I'm like, what? Why did you do this? Why did you make this choice? You don't even like it here. You don't even like the room. It costs too much money. We can do that. I can cancel that. You know what I mean? Like, we're just going back and forth, nitty picky, like having a relationship fight. And then at the end of all of it, I say, feeling bad to find out about all of this, I opted to take $2,000 out of my savings account to pay for the room. Which to me, I'm just like, first of all, it didn't cost that much. But second of all, there was just this way of like buying my way out, but also feeling so responsible that I wanted someone else to feel as bad as I did. And I've talked a lot about this recently in these lives and other sessions about how when you don't have the words, you can be emotionally aware. You can have a great emotional IQ, but you still may not be sharing your feelings in a way that you and other people understand. So when you don't have the words, when you aren't arriving at identifying and sharing, when you don't have that voice, that funk, like we went through on the February guided journaling session, we talked all about how to speak funk, and it was fabulous. It was a great session. When you don't have that, then you find really creative ways of making the people in your life feel like you do in order to express how you feel. And it's not always, I'm going to tear you down because I feel torn down. In this case, it's I feel so responsible for the amount of money that I'm going to double, triple, quadruple down and give you more than I have from my savings account so that you feel as bad as I do and then can somehow recognize that I'm a saint. That's why they call it like victim, martyr, hero. That whole cycle, and you can Google it, or we can have a session on it at some point, but that whole cycle is all just an aspect of being a victim. So I am so much a victim that I'm going to be a generous victim so that everyone understands that I'm the victim here and they can feel like the victim too. Makes no sense, right? Comes from disorganized behavior. It's something that so many of us do. You don't even have to be fully disorganized to be that creative with it. So we have this little disagreement, and rather than being in my joy, rather than being like, "Oh, wow, that's so cool that you chose to do that, and now we have this amazing room for one night, and we can hang out, and we can be together, and we can talk," rather than what really honestly was and could remain magical, I disregarded it to protect myself against it because I felt like I was in trouble for it. So it's just another travel memory to talk up to forgotten or overridden with stress. All the things that we could have shared. We did have a fabulous night. I do remember, like I got like a dress in the mail. I got all dressed up. We had an outdoor fireplace. We had a wonderful dinner, but I could not sit in my joy because joy was so uncomfortable. So I was having a great time, but I was also just so protected, just so wildly against the fact that everything was going on. And I was just afraid for when it was going to be my fault in a way that would surprise me, that would come at me, like an old truth, like an old pattern. Like, when is this going to beat me down? So, no surprise, as we start moving on the next day, we we get into even more of a fight. So I'd say I'm fried, I'm being mean to my partner, I'm more sensitive to moving and long hauls. I was cranky about arriving late in Amarillo the other day and then eating very late in Roswell the next. I'm sure it's just the double-edged sword of almost home. Weeks ago, we left New York with the idea of getting home, checking in, flying back, because being in New York with a car was stupid expensive. I'm just as mad at the idea of getting comfortable in Utah as I am at the idea of quickly moving on. I keep adding up all I need to do if I were home, from laundry to medical appointments. I keep thinking about what's not happening with our home versus what else needs to happen. We thought was a mild possibility we'd be back in our house for Christmas or maybe New Year's. Now I just want to be home while the snow is falling so I can enjoy winter in my house for a minute. But it's also discomforting. My partner has taken to saying, "We're not going to love it," as in Love It or List It, the TV show. But he's changed his tone to indicate that it's on me somehow. Like, "Oh, you want a dog? We won't love it then." We literally have permission to have a dog, but he keeps saying that it's against the grain of the community. Well, so is having a baby, as is having a baby in Old Town Park City. I'm frustrated. Nothing seems to be working. In one sentence, my partner says he'll buy me this or that, and the next, our room is too expensive, and it's my package arriving a day later that keeps us here. But then an employee commends him somehow, and it's the best thing ever. So I go back and forth about figuring out how, like, all of it is on me somehow, right? Like, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling a lot of that, but then I just break it down with worries and cares. I'm worried about our relationships, and I care about joy and laughter and communication, and that's absolutely fantastic, but you can see why I was like, "Okay, yeah, but how?" Like, how do I get there? Because if you just keep telling yourself, "This is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want," you end up feeling that gluttony that is part of what I'm talking about here that's making me explode. It's just this constant desire for different. And I cannot be present when I'm constantly trying to set myself up for what should be or what could be or what it is that I want. And I'm feeling guilty with all of the things that, I was taught about instant gratification. And then I break it all down. It's everything I got done that day and then try to, bring it together, zip it up somehow by saying, uh, compassion for others, which I also find interesting. Like, I'm completely removing myself from my experience because I tell myself what I'm worried about and what it should be. And then I have compassion for others and gratitude, which when you combine it all in that way, like many workbooks and many things do, that's all about other people and that I'm the wrong one. Like, I'm the one that needs to be more compassionate for other people. I'm the one that needs to be kinder. I'm the one that just needs to be more grateful. And this is why it wasn't working. But at this point, I don't know, a year into this process, a year into studying, researching. The beginning of this journal is doing many, many workbooks, specifically relationship workbooks and a variety of cognitive behavior therapy workbooks and a dialectical behavior therapy workbook. So I'm doing all of these things and I'm trying to piece it together in a way that everyone is saying. And that at this point, I start adding affirmations into it, but affirmations feel like shame. So I change it into I want tos, which you can kind of see how funk is arriving very slowly, right? I want tos become cans. The cares from worries and cares become a sense of empowered choices. I break it down with intentions, accomplishments, want tos, and affirmations at some point. Like, I am just trying, but at first I was trying to feel better, as we all do, which is just a way of saying I'm trying to solve the feeling. I'm trying to feel differently. And the magic comes, and this is the part that I'm going to dig up from journals and I'll share with you the next time. The magic comes when I start bringing in the needs and going against that need to energy. So at this point, I bring in positives with gratitude and compassion for others, and then I start doing compassion for self. I had already been doing imagine future and favorite things and gratitude things because that's something I came up with. It's like at this point almost 20 years ago. So I was weaving that in and out as well. But I bring it down to like this CBT workbook. I bring it down to the thought is I'm not worthy. So I am identifying some of those limitations, those limiting beliefs. I'm not worried. I'm not qualified. I don't look right. I am embarrassing. It is my fault. I didn't know what I was doing. Clearly, I don't have what it takes. I messed up. I can never go back. I've been rejected. They're talking about me. It was all just fake. It wasn't real. I'm never going to be qualified again. It's about more. You don't have to. Shut up. You're a waste of time. Like, that's a lot to uncover. But I am so desperate to quit having these increasing body memories that I'm just trying everything that exists. And so I use these workbooks and things to uncover these terrors. It's not so much the workbook that allowed me to uncover that as it was the fact that I'd already been screaming at the page like this for a year. And I did have awareness. I just didn't have the how. So then I break it down with feelings. So part of, clearly funk should start with feelings like everything out there does. So it's identifying the feeling. The reason we do that is to learn with tiny bits of exposure therapy through the funk method to sit with it without changing it. And the reason that we identify it is not to change it. I think a lot of people, they have the brain dump. They identify the feeling, and this happens both on the page and in therapy, and then they go on from there. And the problem with when you just start and stop there is that you're in that shame blame cycle still. You're in that, okay, well, I just need to change the feeling or shove it down or ignore it or sidestep it and then I'll be fine, right? So here I say that this came from a feeling of being mortified and torn between and believing. And I start saying, I needed to. I needed this. I needed to. I needed to. I felt frozen and deeply ashamed. So the importance of identifying feelings and then through a long process or a short, you can do BeMo short. We just when we do guided writing sessions, we go for 2 hours because that is the ultimate in community when guided. It is the ultimate opportunity to sit in a massive amount of tiny bits of exposure therapy so that you are breaking through, you are releasing things. It's like being in a sweat lodge, you know what I mean? And I very much lead it that way on purpose so that in community, when you feel a little bit more held, a little bit more safe, that you can do that. Um, and then you identify the connection to what you wrote. Like the feeling came from this, and that's where you're starting to let like oil and water. You're trying to let like the limiting beliefs, those belief systems rise out of what you're saying so that you can understand the things that you're saying, the things that you're going through, the repetitions. They create a repeating feeling, but a feeling also creates repetitions. And the reason that happens is because we stop at the feeling. We stop at the feeling and therefore we make it a trigger because we're trying to change the feeling. And it just ends up this cycle of like behavior causes the feeling causes the behavior, causes the feeling, causes the behavior, causes the feeling, and that's called burnout. You know what I mean? So you have to go beyond that. You have to continue. But in these traditional formats, it goes thought, feeling, action. Action was just me explaining that I at this point I had quit a job, but somehow, and it's hard emotionally, it's hard to go back and read some of these things because I know, kind of like holding that inner child, even though it was only 5 years ago, I know this woman and how bad she felt. And I'm like, oh, my dear sweet, let me hold you. Like, I feel so bad for her. But another reason that it's hard is because there's very much a lack of cohesive thought, which if you're in insecure attachment, if you're not solidly insecure attachment, if you're in insecure, when you're in a triggered state, when you are cycling, when you are repeating, you have a lack of cohesion, which means that you jump all over the place. And that's okay. You want to allow yourself to do that because, the only way out is through. But here I'm talking about how I quit a job and then I immediately am talking about something that happened in seventh grade. You know what I mean? No explanation as to why, no bridge. And this is how those things connect. This is how, when you allow that messy thought on the page, and then you work through the funk and you work through the funk. You don't even have to reread. You really don't. But if you do at a much later state like I am now, you'll be able to see the lack of cohesion, but you'll also be able to see the connection. So quitting my job and this, trauma memory from seventh grade were tied to each other, even though they had nothing to do with each other. They weren't even the same feeling, like emotional feeling, but they were the same feeling as far as belief. So going back to that thought of I'm not worthy, I'm not qualified, I don't look right, I am embarrassing, etc. This is another example of a memory that has come up for me many, many times. I've written through this seventh grade memory, honestly, probably every single year since doing this. And you will continue to write through those memories until the picture broadens. You will know when you see the full picture because it'll poof. You'll have an emotional freedom moment and you will literally feel it go away. Like it still exists in your life. You cannot change that it exists. But when you allow yourself the safety, the showing up in your need, that's what funk is all about. Showing up in your need over and over and over and over again creates that safety, creates the self-trust. Doing the funk method as a practice You're rewriting your cognitive thought, you're rewriting it. It's easier to rewrite it than a lot of these things that are traditional because funk is easy to remember, and it's already how we speak. We s we speak in these ways of feelings and you, and I need, and I can't, but it's in order so that it takes us all the way through regulation, and then it has just a few tiny rules. Not I am my feeling, but I feel. That's a tiny rule. And you with compassion, not criticism, tiny rule. Need for, tiny rule, right? These are all aspects that completely change your life with just these tiny rules and putting it in order. So, as I was saying, I bring up the same memory every single year. It's still something that I am witnessing. It is something that I am noticing, that I'm allowing to come up. It is a terrifying, deeply heavy and shamed memory for me, but I do know there's something more. But you don't try to push it. When you try to push it, you end up making, like, the contrast. Like, if you were to, like, edit a photo, you make the dark darker and the light lighter, and you can't see in the dark corners. So, rather than showing up in the cans in that sense, like, trying to like, cans, the need to energy, like, "I can get through this. I can just see the other side." Rather than showing up in that way, you still, like, smack in the middle, center on those needs. It's the only thing you ever have to do, and eventually it gets brighter in all of the corners. But allow it to come up. If there are stories that you have repeated time and time again, allow it to come up because there's more there. So I break it down with how the thought and feeling tie together, the thought and the action tie together, and then I bring it to the now and the thought, the feeling, and the action. And I'm trying to essentially derive what's going on. I don't because it's not in order. Like it doesn't it's not like a ladder. It's kind of back and forth and all over the place. And it's one of those things where it's both obvious and confusing. So I didn't really land anywhere. At this point, I've created the worries, the cares, the gratitude, and self compassion as and a daily recap still. It's like my everyday thing. And I like draw it into quadrants and I do this thing every single day. And get to a point where I break it down as barriers versus strategies. So I'm trying all of these things and trying to talk to myself differently, but every time I arrive at it, I explain the situation and then essentially I explain why I am wrong, what I did wrong, and what I should do. So, I'm not just sharing with you my personal journey as to why I arrived in this like anti need to energy and this shame, blame, and like teaching in this way with BeMo over and over again. It's not necessarily just me, you know what I mean? Like this is the way that I think many, many people arrive in it. And that's why having a therapist with speaking talk therapy and the different styles, like they're the ones that are meant to be like, go over here. But here I am in this world where my life is getting worse and worse. My relationship is holding on by a thread because I am going through so much and it's not his fault and he can't handle me on top of his entire life. We've been together 10 years at this point. So it's nothing new. The world is shut down. I can't go to therapy, but I am still calling my therapist every single week. These things happen. I'm on the move. Everything in life is on the move, and the world is painting a picture because it's the year of COVID. It's painting a picture that really is showing me like the small amount of support that you have in your life right now is holding on by a thread because people in the world are dying. People are disconnected. My what I thought was a very strong and loving relationship, we are not having the same issues as everyone else. Like, we're used to spending time together, living in a small space together, working together. That is not our problem. We're enjoying that. But everything is igniting between us because I'm a very feeling person. He is not. We don't understand how to speak to each other. There's more to speak about. There's more to speak through, and we don't have words. We don't have the ability to connect in those things. So while we had the ability to be together, it, you know, right there on top of each other all of the time, like in each other's space, and still figure out how to provide space and be our own individual selves, we still didn't have connection. And then not being able to see my therapist, not being able to go to therapy, it wasn't the first time, but I think the really urgent awareness that older people were at risk, there were high risk people everywhere, people are dying, like, it really made it far more apparent than it ever had before that, like, I could be in the middle of all of this healing and my therapist could pass away. Like, that was a very real thing for me, and at this point, my therapist and I had been together for 15 years, on and off, and I couldn't even fathom the thought. Like, we were so deeply in reparenting that there was, like, he's my parent identity going on, and then it was like, yes, but no, and we were having that back and forth. So for me, it would have been very tragic in the middle of all of that to emotionally lose yet another parent. I'd already lost my mom at the age of 16. And so I had these worries. I had these really deep fears, but I also was having this body keep score flashbacks and memories, and these things were coming up because I was doing something every day and I was doing a ton of behavior study and a ton of research, but I didn't have the how. And I felt the urgency to create a how because what if? What if I end up single again and I'm totally on my own? That's okay. I was fantastic at being single. I'll be fine. But also, what if that happens and my therapist also dies? And what if? And what if? And it was centered more in realism than spiraling. Like, it didn't actually send me through a spiral, but it made me try to find an action just desperately. Like, how do I solve this? How do I quit feeling this way? How do I quit having these terrifying memories? I mean, I can still sometimes barely speak about it, but what I was going through, those, like, the knives thing, it was the first of many body memories, and of course, it was in some ways the worst, but I literally would just get sparked by the road we were on. That's something where hindsight became insight. I didn't fully know what was sparking it until that was all hindsight turned to insight. So I was on the road because we were on this massive, unplanned road trip. We had gone from where I was raised in North Carolina down to Texas. And then we had gone from Texas up to Utah. And these are two very important roads in my life. One of them being the road that literally killed my mother. As in, we drove back from Christmas vacation. She threw a blood clot. She had a stroke the day we arrived and was gone within 18 hours. And that was New Year's Eve. That's just boom, it just happened. And it's only the two of us. The rest of the family was all doing their own thing. So that road from North Carolina to Texas, we traveled, and that was actually the first road that I started to teach what I was doing to my dear niece. I was explaining to her some of the better aspects of what would become the BeMo practice. That was the first time I brought it up to somebody, was on that road. So between teaching somebody that practice and between being on that road, I was kind of opening up. I was getting vulnerable, but I'd always been really good at being uncomfortable and really good at being unhappy and really good at dark things and really good at hard things, because that's what happens when you're raised in volatility and, like, that's your MO. You know what I mean? So I could talk about it. I could talk about it all day, every day for hours and be right there with it. It was no problem. But it did open up something in me so that when we switched from Dallas, where I went and showed my partner, like, this is where I lived in Dallas when we lived in Dallas, and this is, my high school, and, we're having these connections, we're doing these things, we're hanging out with my old high school friends, and then we go to that other part of the road from from Texas to Utah, and this is the road that in that direction specifically is the direction I drove for my own mother's funeral. And it's also a road that I have driven over a dozen times with various family members after that, and some very, tragic things in the aftermath of that. So the funeral wasn't even necessarily the trauma, it was the aftermath of what would drag me across that road many, many times after that. So now I'm feeling a dozen different road trips in one as we're going through that. And that is why my body memories are just like going rampant. And it's all happening with this kind of like EDMR, like the or EMDR, like the lines in the road and the self-hate of looking at myself. And we've been doing at this point, we're like 19,000 miles, no joke, into this road trip. And it's just this everyday like session with hating myself and being zoned out and half tired and in the passenger seat and just living this life on the road. So when the worst of it happened in New Mexico, it was the worst of it because usually when I had those body memories, I could just survive a few minutes and it would be gone. As long as I could just shut it down and ignore it, it would go away. But in this New Mexico moment, it was repeating and repeating and repeating, and it was no longer going away. And you can see me like still holding my hands because it felt like knives. It felt like a machete. It felt like serious paper cuts over and over and over again, but very specifically, it was like the very fine skin between all my fingers and the very fine skin at the corner of my mouth and the very delicate skin in the insides of my thighs. And it just kept happening and it would happen rapidly to all those sections. And I would just like flinch. Like I would be fine in the passenger seat and then all of a sudden go entirely crazy. Like, I would just be like, "Ah!" And, like, seriously, I couldn't tell if I was screaming and crying or if I was holding it all in so tightly that I was screaming and crying within. Like, I dissociated so instantly, so violently in order to survive those moments that I'd had no grip on reality whatsoever. I was no longer in a car, I was no longer in my body, and I genuinely worried that this amount of dissociation was going to send me into full-blown diagnostic schizophrenia, and that by the time we got back to Utah, that I would be committed for life, that I would just be gone because I couldn't stop it. It was getting worse. I didn't feel like myself. I couldn't change it. I couldn't control it. And I felt like I was going absolutely insane. And when I would finally get through it and my whole body would release and just kind of fall apart, and I would just sit in the passenger seat sobbing like an empty shell of a body just sobbing. The reason I was sobbing was not the feeling, because again, I couldn't even acknowledge the feeling because it would happen again. So it wasn't even the feeling, it wasn't even the experience. I would sit there sobbing in absolute fear that I was losing it, that I was gonna go away forever. And I didn't wanna share it. I didn't wanna share it because it would ignite it, and I would end up crazy every time. Like, I couldn't even complete a sentence, but I also didn't wanna share it for fear that someone was gonna be like, "Woo, you're off your rocker, I'm sending you away." You know what I mean? And that was part of my experience, that was part of my childhood. There were literal times in the months after my mom died where to have a daughter left at home and not want a daughter left at home, my my dad would give me, the medicine that our doctors had prescribed to help us sleep after my mom died, yada, yada, yada. He would administer that every day. But I literally would randomly overdose when I'm not even the one being, in charge of my own medicine, and then I would wake up in a mental ward with my family trying to sign me away, like, literally be like, "Just take her, just take her." Like, I don't want a daughter right now. So literally was being drugged and, like, sent away. Thankfully, in the state of Texas, you're an adult at the age of 17, and so the fact that I was awake and aware, I could be like, "Nope, I'm out of here." But this is where that very real fear is coming from. But I had explained enough of it over the 6 months of this road trip to my partner that he could piece it together. So in this repeating moment, when all of this is coming up for me, he called my therapist. And my therapist, because we've been together for 15 years, because he knew that I knew, but I wasn't making the connection because I literally couldn't afford in my mind and body to make that connection. He was like, you know what? 6 months ago, I said, try to stick with it, try to find the information in it, try to understand where it's coming from. But he's like, are you okay if I just break all of the rules in therapy and tell you what's happening? And he didn't have to say anything. He was explaining it more for my partner than he was for me because just seeing my reflection like I am now in the Substack in speaking to him, I already knew. I already knew exactly what was happening. But even to have him explain it, to reiterate where body memories come from, why they're called body memories, why they're flashbacks, not totally craziness, why it's complex PTSD, which has a lot of flashbacks, right? For him to explain it to me did quiet it. It did allow me to go home without as many sessions, but it didn't allow it to go away. And then even a year later, I went from knives being less of a thing, but also still very much a thing, to extreme issues with like the body presence of like swallowing. Like all of a sudden I would get really aware of swallowing and I would like lose the timing of it. And I couldn't figure out how to swallow or breathe, or like it would just all go away and the anxiety would come up. That was the next thing that happened to me in body memories. And then severe claustrophobia, which was in my mind 100 times worse than the knives. I would have traded for the knives in that moment because it the worst of it happened to me in the middle of a 14-hour flight, and it didn't go away for 36 hours, which is what my most recent embodiment blog post on Substack is about, and you can read about that there. But I just wanted to share where I was and why it was coming up, the road, the memories of the road, being able to brain dump, being able to put on all of that on the page, but also why I wasn't getting through it, why I was still blaming myself for having the experience at all and trying to jump immediately to getting out of it, or how I can do better and how I can do more. And maybe if I just did this, and maybe if I was just a nicer person, and maybe if I didn't blow up at my partner so often, and maybe if I switched to doing therapy twice a week, and it was just so much doing energy. And I was just all making it worse because it was sitting in my shame and blame. It was sitting in my beliefs rather than sitting in my power. So the next time I do one of these reading sessions, I'm going to show you the moment in which the funk method that you now know in your BeMo journal, at the front of your journal that teaches you that BeMo practice, I'm going to show you where that arrives. This is kind of how it was arriving, how, the studies that came from the workbooks, the research, the therapies, the talk therapies, like it came from all of those things. It came from using them in the worst part of life, and they did not hold me. They made it so much worse. That's with a therapist and with a loving partner and with access and with my Maslow taking care of. There's so many people out there who don't have access to all those things. They are not that blessed. They are not that lucky. And what I want for everybody in the world is to be able to just have their power, regardless of where they are, and just work through their own. So I will share when the funk method actually arrived, and then the trajectory, kind of like I shared. I shared about 3 different posts over 3 days, but also a little bit that happened over the course of about 2 weeks here, how it was getting worse and more shamey and more arguments. And there's a point where I got out of the car and just disappeared, like literally like ran away. I'm like, you can drive home. I don't freaking care. You know what I mean? Like, it's just getting worse too. after the funk method arrives, it's I am saying a lot of the same things, but it is making sense and it is getting better. And the trajectory just goes up and up and up and it's taking off. And it's all just clicking. It's all connecting. And when I say it's going up and up and up, I don't mean that we're getting exponentially better. The point is not to do more and get better. The point is to not like double down and, turn your healing into another need to energy. But the way that I speak to myself is just getting so much better. The way that I'm living my life, the ability to be present without the fear of what if? What if something happens? What if I miss something? What if I forget something? What if body memories come up? What? So the ability to be present and then the ability to allow presence to include happiness and joy, to actually commit to the memory, to my memory, the joy in my life, the things that were good, rather than to constantly file the memories of this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong as some sort of proof, as some sort of collateral, but also as some sort of just attempt at learning, which is natural. We can talk about that too. It's they call it threat to pet. It's like it's the reason that we file away all the bad things and we forget the good things is because it's just survival. But I was finally able to exit survival for the first time in my life. So I will find those journals. I will figure out at what point in that journey that happened, and we will talk all about that the next time that I read from my journals. We do a Substack live every week. We rotate through Journal with Me sessions where I just hold the space and we just do a journal prompt together and tiny little, like 10 to 15-minute lunch and learn sessions. And then today was just an hour-long dump about the journey. It came from the BeMo community who had the request to have more insight into how other people are using their practice. I hope that this was helpful. Please send me any feedback. Let me know what you liked or disliked, what was or wasn't helpful. And if you want to jump into behind the scenes of other people's BeMo journey on social media right now, especially on Instagram, for the last 2 weeks, one of our community members, Sarah, took over our Instagram and shared her entire practice, what she does, what her pages look like. And I love it. It's so absolutely fantastic. So you can jump over there and see all about Sarah 1 year into her practice. And if you want to do that too for yourself, I would love to have you share your own BeMo practice. So again, please let me know what you liked, what more you want, and what did and didn't work, because I am here for you. So I will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining.